Hi everyone, my name is Andrea Miranda, and for my project, I'll be exploring the effects of cocaine trafficking, particularly answering the question how does the increasing demand for cocaine negatively impact the country of Ecuador? Let's briefly explore the history of the coca plant and its use in the Andes mountain region. Shown here is the coca plant growing on the side of a mountain. It thrives in these tropical climates with high amounts of rainfall. Erythroxylum coca, also referred to as a coca plant, is one of two species that produce the alkaloid cocaine. It is a bush that produces flowers and coca fruits shown here. We can also see the leaf of the plant where cocaine is extracted from. Coca was and still is an incredibly important plant to the indigenous communities of the Andes. It's used in rituals, as a medicine, and plays a role in many other aspects of life. Coca is typically brewed into a tea and can be made into a flour, but the most common form of consumption is chewing the coca leaves. This map, published in 2016, outlines the known South American coca growing regions. Colombia and Peru are the primary producers, with coca growing regions shown in red and green, respectively. So, when did coca become cocaine? The coca plant was first introduced to Europe in the 16th century, after the Spanish colonials discovered its use in present day South America, though it wasn't popular until the late 1800s. Cocaine was first isolated from the coca plant in 1860 by the German chemist Albert Niemann. In the following decades, it grew popular as a medicine and tonic, and advertisements promoting its use began circulating in the US and Europe. There were many motives that led to the regulation of cocaine and narcotics. The most well known course of action was President Richard Nixon's launch of the war on drugs in the 1970s. In the 1980s, President Ronald Reagan reinforced and expanded Nixon's war on drugs. Advertisements and media were heavily used to discourage users using fear mongering tactics. Ultimately, the drug war was unsuccessful in its mission to stop cocaine use, and soon cartels arose to meet the demand. In fact, in 1990, the Colombian economist Eduardo Sarmiento Palacio argued that the United States' war on drugs led directly to the rise of Colombian drug cartels. In the late 1970s, we see the emergence of the first major drug cartel. This was the Medellin cartel from Colombia that was founded by the notorious Pablo Escobar, shown here on the left. He controlled nearly the entire cocaine supply chain in the 80s and early 90s until his death in 1993. Following the demise of the Medellin cartel, others rose to prominence. These included the Cali cartel in Colombia and the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico, which is still active today. So, what is Ecuador's role in the cocaine trade, and what actions led to the current state of violence in the country? Ecuador is bordered by Colombia and Peru, and by the Pacific Ocean on the west coast. It also encompasses the Andes Mountains where the coca plant typically grows. However, Ecuador produces extremely minimal quantities of the coca plant. In 1532, a Spanish expedition conquered the Inca, one of the indigenous communities of the Andes, and attempted to eradicate the use of coca. The eradication was only successful in present day Ecuador, which is why they don't produce a plant nor cocaine in the present day. Ecuador has many major exports, including shrimp, coffee, cacao, crude oil and derivatives, and lastly, bananas. Ecuador is the largest exporter of bananas in the world. It's these exports and other factors I'll be discussing that made the country incredibly attractive to drug cartels. Because it's the world's largest exporter of bananas, it's the perfect place to hide cocaine and smuggle it out of the country, and drug traffickers have infiltrated this industry. Ecuador also has excellent shipping ports, like the one in Guayaquil, the country's largest city, shown here in the bottom right corner. This map shows the drug trafficking routes in and out of Ecuador. Over a third of Colombia's cocaine production flows into Ecuador for trafficking, and at least 44% of that production goes to the United States. Here we see newspaper articles from 2022 to 2023 alone, showing how drug trafficking and violence have affected the country. The role of Ecuador in cocaine trafficking remained somewhat low profile until the last several years. However, decades of political issues and changes working in a domino effect led to the violence seen today. Ecuador's role in the cocaine trade dates back to the 1980s. It began as a transit route for Peruvian coca base getting trafficked into Colombia. It was also home to chemical trafficking networks that supplied Colombian laboratories that processed the coca base into cocaine. It wasn't until the year 2000 that Ecuador emerged as a cornerstone of the transnational cocaine supply chain. As a response to an economic and political crisis, the US dollar became the country's new currency. Inside Crime Organization stated, "It began with the dollarization of the economy, which instantly made Ecuador a money launderer's dream, a country bordering the world's biggest cocaine producer that uses the currency of the world's largest cocaine market." At the same time, the mass fumigation of coca crops in Colombia and the Revolutionary Armed Forces, also known as the FARC, a Marxist rebel group, started pushing coca cultivation towards the Ecuador border. The FARC started supplying a powerful Colombian cartel, who then opened up routes in and out of Ecuador. The Sinaloa cartel from Mexico wanted in and soon set up their own networks in Ecuador as well. Those events coincided with the 2006 presidential election that brought Rafael Correa to power. His actions greatly influenced the country's political and criminal climate, even today. In 2009, Correa closed a U.S. naval base in the city of Manta and ended cooperation with the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency. As a result, Ecuador's maritime economic zone was left effectively free of surveillance. These territories would soon be filled with drug boats and planes. He also directed security forces and intelligence units away from combating organized crime and put Ecuador's ports and airports into concession to private owners, making it harder for the state to enforce mandated screening of cargo. These policies created room for drug trafficking to flourish. Another major development was the end of U.S. supported aerial fumigation of the coca crop in Colombia in 2015. This led to a massive expansion of the crop and the finished product, and with more available cocaine to ship into Ecuador, drug gangs began to battle over the booming business. Ecuador's two presidents following Correa failed to resolve these issues. Violence linked to drugs began to spike around 2018 when local crime groups competed for better positions in the trade. Initially, the violence was confined to prisons, and it led to penitentiaries becoming operating bases for the drug trade. To make matters worse, a drop in the price of oil and the steep economic downturn due to the COVID-19 pandemic led to a steady supply of young and jobless recruits for criminal groups. Today, Mexico's most powerful cartels, including Sinaloa and a group from the Balkans named the Albanian Mafia, are involved with the crime in Ecuador. Local prison and street gangs are also working with international trafficking groups. To add fuel to the fire, these gangs have found another source of income amidst the unrest and violence that already exists: extortion. Shopkeepers, community leaders, schools, and other small businesses are forced to pay a tax to criminal groups in exchange for their safety. Shown on the top right are broken bottles lining the top of a home's outer wall as a way to deter break ins. The bottom left image shows the body of a taxi driver who stopped his vehicle to buy something and was unfortunately in the wrong place at the wrong time. The violence caused by drug trafficking became extremely apparent earlier this year. On August 9th, the presidential candidate Fernando Villavicencio was shot in the head after leaving a campaign rally in the capital city of Quito. This is the first time a presidential candidate has been assassinated in Ecuador. It shone a spotlight on the destructive impact of the booming cocaine trade and the ruthless gangs fueling brutal violence in the country. For decades, Ecuador was one of Latin America's least violent countries. Now it has the region's fourth highest homicide rate, higher even than Mexico. Homicides quadrupled between 2018 and 2022, climbing to a record of 26 per 100,000 inhabitants. Ecuador, a once peaceful haven, has seen violence explode due to drug trafficking and gang associated violence due to the high demand for cocaine around the world. The citizens of Ecuador live in fear every day, and this is an ongoing silent war that is rarely talked about. I also have a personal connection to this topic. My whole family currently resides in Ecuador, and I visit them almost every year. Sadly, I have also personally witnessed some of the turmoil that's going on in the country. They are the reason I'm passionate about bringing this issue to light. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you so much for watching.